uh, September 18th, 2024. Edition of the Toledo Planning Commission. May we start the meeting by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Move your hats if you have them. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Anybody got an idea on Brian?
None whatsoever.
What's that?
None.
None.
Don't know.
It might be a point to make at this time that Daniel Keene has resigned from the planning commission. His duties as stay-home dad are taking up a lot more of his time. And so we will have a vacancy that we'd like to fill as soon as possible. And how would that go about happening?
We'll post a vacancy.
Okay.
On public areas. And you do need to motion to either excuse or not excuse Brian tonight, so someone needs to do a motion and.
What do you say? Excuse me.
I'll move that we excuse Brian. Sure.
Can I get a second?
Excuse me.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
I
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we do have a quorum. Call for other business items. I believe we wanted to discuss an item that Cowlitz Meadows is having some concern with regards to imaginative plate equipment that has been a condition placed on them for their park. And two, I'd like to conclude the workshop at so that we can move on to the regular agenda. So
Consent agenda,
we
the consent agenda is next.
can do the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
I would like it. I have a question
Yes, sir.
on the business licenses.
Yes.
One of the applications was from the Toledo Baptist Church.
I see that.
Do churches need to apply for business licenses?
I'm not sure if they do in the city, but I'm not sure they don't for the state, and we get the state licenses that are indicating their location of doing business. Does the Presbyterian Church have business license?
We don't do business.
Oh,
Well, in a way, I guess. But I don't want to mix church and state, but you know, we're not in the business to make money. Let's put it that way.
I think if the parishioners take a tax deduction for the contributions, then they're a not-for-profit corporation and registered with the state of Washington and require a business license. That's my planner's interpretation of what I think. The person to answer that question is not present at the moment, so hopefully Rachel will show up and she would be the one with the conclusive answer.
I'll take that information to the treasurer of our church.
And would that be?
His name's Tom Hill.
Is his name Tom?
But that's the way I understand it, and that's why churches register as businesses, so that their parishioners can take legitimate tax deductions for contributions to a
Okay.
not-for-profit corporation.
All right,
Y'all had a chance to go over the business licenses?
yes.
Any objections?
No.
You need a motion,
What's that?
you
To,
need a motion.
Thought I got a
Consent.
motion.
Let's
And a
see.
second
Oh, you did.
on the consent agenda.
did you?
No,
Did I? Oh, I'm looking for one then.
So moved.
Okay, discussion. Does anybody have any problem with these?
No,
I didn't either. How about the meeting minutes?
You made a minutes.
no
Everything
problem,
okay
no
on the
problem.
meeting
I didn't
minutes?
see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's our discussion. Let's take a vote.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Commission reports, well, that's interesting.
Well, you know,
Commissioners.
I don't really have so much a report as a little very brief narrative, and that is that as a planning commissioner, anytime I'm driving around out of town, back into town, around town, I'm always looking. And my passenger is on the city council. And so we are always looking and discussing the urban growth areas, the boundaries, the problems as we see them that exist, zoning. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time. So that's my report.
Okay,
There's something else.
I almost live this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
glad to hear you're keeping busy.
With the stop signs.
Yeah.
When
that
I
too.
hear about the stop signs right here, you know, people are starting complain, everybody complain by stop signs. But, you know, I started thinking the same way, but I changed my mind. Because it's better for me, when I walk to the post office, I do the stop and everybody has to stop.
Yeah.
That way I can walk. It's not everybody go like that, Yeah, it's a lot of. People don't respect the stop signs anyway.
Well, that's.
It's good,
So should we go to the unfinished business
Let's do.
and conclude our zoning and code development discussion
So.
and segue that into the other two items?
Sure thing.
So you were looking for an answer on one particular question?
Yeah, I guess from our discussion in the workshop, the only thing that was remaining is. Do we want to tweak? Would we like to ask the county to tweak the area within the urban reserve that they proposed? By either removing or adding some areas? That's the general question I'm asking.
That's for the urban growth and the urban reserve, correct?
So the urban growth that we were proposing
Right.
is the colors, because we proposed zones.
Right.
We actually hadn't yet, that was going to be this month's planning commission workshop, but since the county's saying no urban growth area, then it doesn't do us any good to zone it. So the discussion now becomes, do we want an area that's hatched to not be hatched, which would mean not in the county's urban reserve area? And then do we want an area that's colored but not hatched to be hatched, and that would be adding to the county's urban reserve area? And I would make that request of the county based on input from you and city council when I get there.
I don't understand why they didn't put those 5 parcels in if we're gonna run broader line down Plymouth.
These are on the north side of Plumondon that you were talking about.
On the north side, those looks like a tower. With a big square on the top and then the big square on the bottom left. That seems incongruent with our development. Unless there's some environmental reason why they don't want that.
Doesn't appear that way from the environmental constraints mapping that I use, so I can easily make that request that they add those into the urban reserve area.
Steve. And one at the top,
Right here.
yeah, it's in the corner right there,
Yeah, why wouldn't we want that?
yeah. Right here,
We do want that.
It looks like they have
you have the five.
some more
Right.
strings than the rest of it, but not a lot, so.
Yeah.
And the other one is we really come to a determination on those south of Plymouth on what we wanna do.
I don't know what to do with okay.
Yeah, I'd like
Totally.
to do what they wanna do, but it's hard to tell.
That's it.
If you ask 10 people, you get 10 different answers.
Well, and as you were saying, if you ask
The
10
error,
people, then if you ask the heirs, you get a different answer still, so. So everybody within those families might not have the same answer either.
Yeah, you're going to have different answers.
Can we just leave them alone?
Yeah.
Well, if we do nothing, they will end up in urban reserve because the county, that's the way the county is the map. So if we don't ask them to modify it, they won't likely modify it. Unless they show up at a county hearing and say, we don't want this. So if you wanted to alert them that, hey, the county's proposing this, you should go let them know you don't want it, and then they could. It wouldn't be a city request to add them in or move them out.
I mean, actually, they're in the county, it's none of our business one way or the other, it's like.
No, but
Yeah.
But we'd have the, I mean, we're talking to the county, so if we knew conclusively what they wanted, but if we don't.
We
should just-
don't?
We should just leave it alone, probably.
Okay, that's what
And then
I,
if we wanted to do the neighborly thing, maybe somebody that knows one or more of them could say, hey, the county's proposing this, it may, you might want to keep your eye on it and. Let the county know what you want, because they could be their own advocate.
what would be the timeline on that be? Because I know somebody that there
Okay,
quite well and see them, but I won't see them probably for another 2 weeks.
oh, it won't happen that fast.
Okay, I'll let them know.
This
I'll
is
just
a
let them know.
months-long process, and they will get notice of it from the county that they're adopting a new comprehensive plan, and.
Yeah.
They'll hold public hearings on it, at their planning commission and at their county council.
All right,
There's still time,
okay.
there's months.
I'll try to remember to pass that on.
Yeah.
Try.
But in this case, I mean, the city has effectively done nothing. We weren't the ones proposing to add them in, and we just wouldn't ask to take them out either, so
Right.
we just talked about it a lot.
So do you want to segue into the next section of?
Well, so these pieces out of the junction, we're fine with leaving the commercial and industrial pieces out.
But that one's right here.
Well, I'm not fine with it, but,
Should we ask them to add those areas back in as well, or should we not make that?
I'd rather have the industrial area to tell the truth, but.
It does look like the commercial area they pulled out is potentially more environmentally impacted. So if you look at the two maps together,
Oh, yeah.
you know, that one appears to have a shorelines area across a lot of those commercial parcels, so maybe if we just make the request of the industrial parcels and not those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 commercial parcels.
Yeah, that seems a bit of a reach to just cause, because of hydric soil cause that to stay out.
Well, in that case, it's actually a shoreline. The yellow is a shoreline area. It's not just hydric soils that,
I'm talking about the industrial zone.
oh, the industrial zone, it's just hydric soils up there primarily with some wetland indicators.
Yeah, we should keep that. If they, yeah.
I mean, listen to them, I mean, try.
So I would ask them to put back in the 5 parcels that are on Plamondon. And ask them to put those 5 industrial parcels back in the urban holding area.
Yeah.
And then I would not ask them to modify anything on the south side of Plamondon. Excuse me. Nor would I ask them to modify anything in those commercial parcels that appear to have the shorelines designation over them.
Mhm.
I did have a question for you though, is why is nothing being addressed on those 4 lots or 5 lots in between Toledo Tell and the section that we're requesting to be included on the north side of Plamondon?
Well, so. The other piece of this is trying to balance all this with housing and population growth numbers.
Okay,
We can't ask for more property than we need.
okay,
And we really wanted to get out and grab the junction. So we kind of tailored all of our population growth out along that corridor, along the 505 corridor. So and we only expanded that in very minimal areas where we thought it was significant or where we suspected that maybe there was a property owner who was interested in developing.
I recall that conversation.
So, so that's why we didn't include more. The county asked us, had we considered going out Toledo Vader instead of going out 505? Because then you don't have to deal with the state as much. You're not dealing with the state highway. It makes it, maybe in their mind, it made it easier. In my mind, it makes it better planning to use the state highway as infrastructure as a backbone to support growth, but my answer to them is that the areas on Toledo Vader were just as heavily impacted, and no, we had never considered that because the community wanted to grow out 505 to the junction.
Mhm.
So that was what I heard from past process, and that's what I passed along to the county. Okay, so I think I do have good, clear direction, as long as I summarized that correctly when I said it. Should I say it again? The south side of Plamondon, we're not gonna ask for them to change any of that.
Yeah.
The north side of Plamondon include those 5 residential parcels.
Mhm.
And then out off of 505, we'd ask them to include those 5 larger industrially designated parcels.
Correct.
And then no modification to the commercial parcels that they've excluded that appear to be impacted by the shorelines area.
Right, but one question. That little triangle, the triangular tip on the part that you were just talking about, is that where that little house is?
Yeah, it's with the little.
That's where the
The
little house
Yeah,
is.
the little house and.
Okay, it's not occupied, but
No. it's
The
not-
triangular tip out off of 505.
yeah, north of 505, the
Yeah,
very,
commercial.
yeah, commercial. We wanted it commercial. There's a little house there.
Mhm.
If I just want to make sure I'm seeing that right.
Let me.
And then there's
I
the-
can Actually pull that up. as well.
Okay, and then there's a
The
logger that's got a
place-
bunch of equipment next to it.
Oh, you're talking about in the woods.
Yeah, on the side,
Yeah.
on the right side.
Yeah, it is in the woods, yeah.
This Woodlock? No, it's this side.
That's
for
this
the-
side. It is this side. It's this side of I-5,
This side, I thought.
yeah. Lance Christensen built it a long time ago.
Yeah, I used to own that place there.
Yeah,
Let me see if I can get you an answer here. I can pull up the assessor's records and just look and see if there's a house on that piece or not.
I think Kelly's own that place, the chap, Kelly's chap own that place right now. But somebody's
I
cleaning.
think he acquired it, yeah.
Yeah, it's
It
been
looks
cleaned.
like the owner is Balcom, Baucum,
okay.
is the family name. It says it's used as a single family residential dwelling. Has a pretty low, I mean, the structure is valued at 31.8
Okay, that'd be it.
and it's 3.86 acres.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
So does it sound like I've summarized our discussion well and I should take that?
Yeah.
My next step is to take this to council and kind of tell them,
Right.
summarize what we talked about and the recommendation from you all and then they'll add to it, modify it, and then I'll take it back to the county. So I'll try to get in front of them at their next council meeting and just probably be another business or no public hearing, no decisions made. I'm just asking for directions.
Okay,
And if we want to move on to the discussion outline for Toledo zoning code development.
You want to do that one or should we do the other
Which one you want to
business?
talk about, the
Whichever one, if you're.
playground equipment? I have no idea what. Imagine if a playground equipment is. Anybody out there?
I don't know what that would be.
I mean,
It's
I'm
supposed
only.
to, it's supposed to spur their brains.
Yeah, I was kind of imagine kind of a monkey bars that's a lot not like the monkey bars we had as kids. But that had holes and things and you could do different things with it and kind of like one of those giant,
So actual constructed play equipment,
yeah, I think that's what that was.
like slides, monkey bars, swings, that type of thing.
Yeah, but not quite like we had.
Yeah, those are illegal, I'm sure.
All these would be built to code.
Yeah.
And there is a significant cost with some, I mean, those
Yes,
are,
they're not.
those are
cheap.
not cheap play structures, so you're talking about a manufactured play structure of sorts.
Right.
Or are you just talking about a set of swings and a teeter totter?
I think that the intent when we were looking at that was that they had to do more than just blow a whistle at it. Okay, that it needed to be a playground for the kids in the neighborhood to go to. And I think it probably needs to be a play structure. Rather than a couple of swings and a bench.
Okay.
And
Well, and this is the body that came up with the condition, so That's why I was asking, because the imaginative play equipment was something that I probably wrote in the staff report, and that I don't remember us having any clear discussion on it.
I don't recall
I
those
don't-
words exactly myself.
I don't
But
remember.
the applicant is asking for clarification because they've submitted a landscape plan for that and showed no play equipment or no benches or anything. So the city engineer who's reviewing their landscape plan said, I don't think this matches, so I sent him the list of conditions, and there are a number of conditions in there that they have, you know, different benches and other, you know, seating areas and things. But then it had that one condition that referenced imaginative play equipment, so I can't interpret that. I don't know what we all meant when we said it, so I thought I would just bring it back to you all. I wouldn't take that back to council, so I think if you all can give me some guidance on that, I can give it back to the applicant, and we can probably.
Well, I think we just need a different adjective. Imaginative, let's use traditional or appropriate or,
Well, all of those things are ambiguous,
Yes,
so
they are.
the more clarity we can provide the applicant, the more likely it is that we'll get what we want. If we leave it open-ended for them, they'll give us something. So,
Well, I mean, think about what you want your kid to play in, you know?
Doesn't match.
Huh.
I'm sorry?
The park down there
Yeah,
doesn't match their play equipment.
Is
With
it?
steering wheels and stuff, so you can.
Yeah.
pretend
okay,
you're
that'd
on a
work.
ship or whatever.
Right.
That's what they're.
But
What if-
you need to bring a lot of kids to go into a park and play. I go into a park every day, walking my little dog there, I don't see no kids. Sometimes I see somebody there, but I don't see no kids by there.
Hmm.
okay, now you're gonna have a park that's inside a residential neighborhood that everybody's gonna walk to with their kids, and moms are gonna have a place to sit down and watch their little one.
well, and it will eventually be a city facility out there too.
Yeah.
Because we made that a requirement, they have to build it all and then give it all to the city with the trail.
Yeah.
Correct,
Well, can we say imaginative playground equipment, much like that found at the Toledo City Park?
That would clarify it,
that would do
so
Yeah,
that's what you want to use and that makes sense if you're gonna own it and maintain it eventually, that it would be similar in nature to what you already have.
it.
And whatever it is, even though it's similar in nature to that, it would still be constructed to modern today's code. They
Sure.
would be able to
I
install
think they
it.
weren't constructed that long ago, so.
Oh, okay. I haven't gone and played in the park.
Aren't those pretty new?
Yeah.
10 years.
I think they're replacing them.
I'm sorry?
I think they're gonna upgrade them.
No,
Oh, I thought
somebody,
they had. Oh,
yeah, somebody's been working on this for the last few weeks. Somebody renewed the playground and everything. Yeah, people have been working on that.
We got a grant for that, you know,
Yeah.
did that grant come through?
Yeah, people have been
was
working.
anybody seeing the new playground equipment over at Wallace Pond?
Yeah,
It's what you would consider imaginative, so I just Googled it just to see as well, just to confirm what I was thinking. Usually it has structures, it has some interactive things where kids can play and make believe it's a fort or pirate ship.
Right,
Using your imagination, but it's more interactive, it's not just, like you said, a slide and two swings. It's stuff to climb on, there's rope system, there could be ropes, there could be things to do more than just. you know,
Right.
Basic, it's usually a very well.
so have you seen this stuff over at Wallace Pond?
Yeah.
Is that something
It's
that
got a
would,
lot of that type
so
of
you can
stuff.
put that in
So Wallace Pond or the city playground, something similar in nature to those.
there? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gives,
That'd be fine.
that should give them clear enough direction.
Okay, let's see, where are we?
just, you guys have to have a
So
little
now we're
kids to
into
play the
the
kids
zoning
like they
code, I
got
think.
grandkids.
Discussion of code.
Yeah, discussion of. I thought they were similar to that, usually wondered,
Oh, man,
I actually read it.
yes,
Basically, the trade houses.
I couldn't put it down. It's a page turner, Todd.
Well, it wasn't a page turner, but,
You're talking about the staff report, not the code section. That was attached, right?
well, it's the thing where you had all the setbacks and everything, and
Uh-huh.
That's the zoning code.
Yeah,
The staff report preceded and kind of described it generally in the first couple of pages.
Right.
But then following that, we actually have. It's not exactly in the format of zoning code yet, but it's getting closer and closer the more we work on it.
but you covered all the bases
Yeah,
Okay.
for each one of the types of zones.
Well, residential should be pretty close because I was taking input you've given me on that in the past. And I think we talked a little bit last month about mixed use commercial. The ones we haven't really talked about and the ones I would like to focus on to get, if you're okay with the mixed use commercial, the waterfront mixed use, and the residential zones. And the mixed use commercial would be the downtown commercial. I think on the map, I'm calling it one thing, and in the code, I'm calling it something. I don't know why I didn't stick to the same terminology, but. So the mixed use commercial is the downtown commercial. And
Core, yeah.
the core. So if we could focus on that one and then focus on the industrial and commercial designations. I think that would. And those are last, so the last, what is it, 4 pages of the zoning code,
Right.
the commercial and industrial zones.
Mhm.
Those are the new ones that we haven't really discussed at all. The other zones we've discussed a little bit in our last meeting, so if there are any corrections I need to make. My next step will be to schedule it for a public hearing. And then publicize that, and then with that, I will bring back this so that it amends your current zoning code.
Right.
So it'll look much more like your zoning code does now. This is already in a very similar format, but the numbering isn't quite right and the formatting isn't quite right. So I'll bring it back in that format. So if we're okay with this at the end of this meeting, then my next step would be to schedule it for a public hearing. Either it would probably not be the next meeting. The next meeting, we talk about comp plan policies that support all this now. I'll bring the policy level stuff back. I did it backwards. I developed the zoning code so we could talk about the specifics. And then from that, I'm hopeful that I can be very close on target with the comp plan policies. Because it's a general statement about what the zoning code should be. Usually communities go through that first and then this, but for me, I work through it backwards. To make it easier for myself.
Yeah.
Well, I thought your stuff on the commercial zones, both that and the industrial, light industrial and the industrial zones were excellent in that through previous discussions, we had limited the size of each one of those absent a conditional use permit, which allows us then to have participation in the process. So I mean, looking at this and saying, well, I want, 10 feet here, it really doesn't make much difference. If a guy's gonna come in for a conditional use permit, you're gonna end up discussing all of this.
Conditional uses are subject to additional scrutiny because of a compatibility question.
Right.
So, and that's what allows us to elevate the process to review those, and it allows you to put some discretionary conditions on it that are above and beyond what's in your zoning code.
Carl, may I ask you a question about setbacks?
You should, yes.
They don't map out very well. Like, the low density residential with 20-foot, 15-foot and 25-foot setbacks, I believe you end up with the. No, like
Okay.
4,000 square feet.
5,000 in the
You've
UAG.
also, so you're also proposing changing the lot size in the UGA. Down from 6 to 5.
We're proposing 3 zones instead of 1 now. So, for that area that we've designated as the lowest density residential in the downtown core. That would change. That effectively some of that area would be downzoned. So they wouldn't be as dense as they are. And then the medium density zone where we've applied that allows duplexes, townhomes,
Right back.
and some higher density development.
I believe that the setbacks though, consume all of the 4,000 square feet, is what I was getting at. If you have a 25-foot setback on the front and a 25-foot setback on the rear, and 15 on the sides,
You'll never get it.
I do believe you end up with the 0 buildable envelope.
Oh. So do we want to, well, so front 20 is pretty typical. Side, for a low density zone, 15 is pretty high. I mean, normally you'd see 5 or 7 or 10. But 15 is a pretty big side yard, so we could decrease the side yards.
Toledo is currently 15 in the front, 10 in the back, and 5 on the sides.
we could use what we have now.
Just trying to leave you with something usable.
Well, 4,000 feet is 63 foot square, so if you're taking 20 out of one side and 25 out of the other, you don't leave yourself but about 13 feet for
Yeah.
building, so. We should probably address that.
So either change the lot size minimum up to 6,000 square foot lot.
I think we already codified the fact that we wanted 4,000 square foot downtown.
We're changing the code. This
But we're
will
not
become,
changing that number.
okay,
That's what I'm getting at.
I
And
see.
so I think we need to adjust the rear setbacks to like 5 feet or 10 feet at the most.
So adjust the setbacks to make a 4,000 square foot lot buildable.
Exactly.
And you're okay with a 5 foot back and a 5 foot side, or whatever you have in your code now.
For downtown, I am.
And that's in the lowest density zone, so the biggest lots that you have. Okay,
Thanks for pointing that out, Eric.
No, this will be,
and then it says maximum of 7 dwelling units per acre. So that roughly works out to 4,000 square foot lots. 43,560 is an acre,
Okay,
so if you get,
7 times 4 is 28.
it's 28. So that. 43,560. Yeah, I should get my calculator out.
Do the math, when you record it.
divided the work.
43,560 divided by 7. So that is a 6,000 square foot lot, so we need to change that instead.
Steve drew some nice, asked you to do some samples that are in the current code that shows a couple sample lot sizes with our setbacks. To show you what the building envelope is. If you want this for
If
your.
they're at the end of the land development.
Yeah, I've seen them in there. But if we wanted to maintain that, it would change it to 10 units an acre instead of 7. Approximately at 4,000, because that the math roughly works out, it's about,
Yeah,
so 10 or 11, so maximum of 10 units per acre. And then adjust the setback so that they make sense, and I can just use what you have in your current code now and even pull those diagrams in if that's what you'd like to do.
that's fine.
well, if our lots are 4,000 square feet. So a block is 16,000 square feet. 16 to 20,
Your block,
There's 4 8,000 square foot lots in a block.
Yeah, it's 30.
there's what?
There's 4 8,000 foot lots in a block.
Okay, thank
So
you,
it's 32,000.
Thank
square
you.
feet.
okay.
but a lot of your lots downtown are bigger than 4,000 square feet, I think.
Yeah, sun is big.
Well, they are, but and I think our intention was to allow people who were living in single wides and have another 5,000 square feet left over, they could subdivide their lot, sell it and add to some of our downtown housing need issues. And then, of course, then you also have the ADU issue, so.
Yeah, a lot of your lots,
Yeah, like 8,050 or 8,040 is about the average.
yeah, I think,
And you get 4 of those on a square block, and if you divide those all in half, you get 8 on a square block of 32,000 square feet.
that's, seems to be pretty typical for what you have downtown now. So you're looking at doubling the density within that area that you had said you.
I think that was our intent when we did it the first time, was to enable that to happen. I think our focus at that time, we were looking at some people who are getting older who need the income. They weren't using the lot, it's available land to build something small downtown in the core area. And they could use that income to live out their lives in their house.
Well, and it supports the need for affordable housing because you're increasing the density in your downtown core, which.
Right.
Can we still call that low density? Does it still?
Sure, it will still be the lowest density that you have. The medium, and I guess we should talk about how that relates to the other ones. Because if your medium density housing starts at 8 units an acre and goes up to 14. Well, now your lowest density goes up to 10 is the maximum, so. I guess, you know, that's a fairly. Fairly gentle transition between the low density and the medium density.
Does that line up, Todd, with the other jurisdictions you work with? Is that similar?
The way it's written now is similar to the other jurisdictions I work with. The idea of the 4,000 for in the lowest density residential zone is not typical of what I would see, but I understand the reasoning behind it for this community, and it seems to have made sense. So I didn't take a lot of cues from your existing zoning code when I proposed this draft. I proposed this more based on the tiers that I would normally see in other jurisdictions, but
Okay.
every jurisdiction is different. They're not.
Yeah, sure.
There's no rule about what's your lowest density, and even now, the state is actually pushing to do what you've already done, increasing density throughout. That's why they passed the state laws on ADUs, that's why they passed the state laws on smaller lot sizes, you know, and all of those things. And so what you all are proposing is consistent with what you've done in the past and consistent with new state law, so
Look at us.
look at you, being right at the cutting edge of planning.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't look like I need to adjust any of the other
I did one on the 6,000, they were fine with the setbacks,
in the R2 zones.
yeah.
Yeah, but those are. I don't know why I had the side yard bigger in the lowest density.
It's like they're backwards.
Well, it doesn't work with the lot sizes, but lower density houses usually have spaces between the bigger yards and that sort of thing, so. But I wasn't drawing the parallel between making a 4,000 square foot lot buildable. So I will realign that in the next draft that I bring back to you all.
Are you coming back to us next, or you want to go to council?
No, it'll be back to you next. It just, if we get far enough through it tonight, and you feel comfortable having a hearing about it, I'd probably set the hearing for November and then try to get it in front of council. They'll be doing probably budget through November and December, so I'd probably get it to council in January. And then hopefully that'll give us time to get through the comp plan policies that support all this at our October and December meetings. And then I can take it to council all as a package in January and say, here's the comp plan policies and zoning code. It's kind of the plan in my head at the moment. So. But certainly if you'd like to see another draft, we could still notice the public hearing for November, and I could bring this back again in draft form for discussion in October. We can continue the discussion on it until then. I can make some of these changes. And I can format it, I can further the formatting. So residential, with those changes, are we okay?
Yes.
Are there any comments on the mixed use commercial zone?
Well, one more thing on the residential, I noticed that you've added a line here that I've sort of pushed for, not short of an architectural review board, is development design guidelines that promote aesthetic harmony.
Where is that?
It's on the sheet that only has one line on it.
Yep.
Or 3 lines, actually. Design guidelines, development should adhere to urban design guidelines that promote aesthetic harmony, pedestrian safety, and environmental sustainability. This includes consideration for building facade treatments, lighting, signage, and accessibility.
I'm not following you. Bottom of mixed use. Oh, okay. Well, and that's the other thing that we'll need to work through. We'll have to update our procedures code. So what types of processes these go through remains something that we'll need to define.
Yeah, because aesthetic harmony could be a trap.
Yeah.
Pedestrian safety isn't. Environmental sustainability is.
In a lot of the mixed use zones, you do see some ambiguous language, just because a lot of those are reviewed um, by commissions and by boards,
Mhm.
not by a hearings examiner. So, you know, a hearings examiner or planning staff hate those words when we're trying to review it, because we don't like to have discretion. We like to have clear rules that we can say, this is what applies. This is what you have to do. But a lot of these mixed use developments all do, because there's always inherent risk of incompatibility. Those almost always go to some sort of a review board, either planning commission or architectural review or something.
Okay.
And those boards tend to like the loosey-goosey language, because then they can say, well, that's not aesthetically pleasing. You know, otherwise, if your rules are too tight in those types of scenarios, then you don't have the ability to interpret it. If it says you have to have one of these 5 colors and you have to have these 4 things, and if they have the 5 colors and 4 things, you really have no discretion.
Yeah, I would really try to avoid that, something like that.
For this type of mixed use development, yeah,
Yeah, but the
something that's
problem
gonna be
is that
reviewed
you
by a
get-
board.
It gives you the opportunity to take a look at something that the planner or the planning review people would not. Let's say the guy wants to put 5,000 lumen spotlights out at the front of his building to light up his front yard area. Well, you could say no to that.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, I mean,
We need an
yeah.
opportunity to be able to do that.
I 100% agree with you there,
Okay,
yeah.
So, but I will try to add some more specifics, because you flagged it, and so I'll try to blend that so that there's some discretionary language in there that be more specific about some design guidelines.
well, I was kind of hoping we could move that over and also include it with our residential. You know, maybe take some of the issues out of there, the environmental sustainability issue out of there, but. You know, people in this city are so adamant about preserving the downtown core. But if you look at the downtown core, you have your 1920s farmhouses or little cottages and things like that. But you've also got a series of single wides and stuff, and when houses come in for review, I'm a Fourth Amendment proponent, but there has to be a limit to what people are allowed to do if they're going to be cohesive within the neighborhood. And I don't know how a plan checker actually ever flags that until after the fact, if there isn't some reasonable right to review it.
So I can include in your downtown residential zones, some requirements for building character. There are some non-discretionary ways to do that. I wouldn't want a building permit to come before planning commission, right? I mean,
Right.
people want to be able to come in and
I
just
don't have
apply
time.
for it over the counter and get a building permit and build a house.
Right.
Or build an addition onto their house or a shed. They don't want to have to come to, 4 committee meetings with 6 staff reports and all that stuff. That's not the expectation generally, but I actually did design review in a community where they had design standards for all their new buildings, and that was a staff level review. And it was simple. You have to have at least 4 of these items, and they were items like, what was it? It was at least it was at least an 8-inch eave. You had to have intersecting roof lines. You had to have some the shutters, the fake shutters on the houses. So they had a list of things that somebody could choose from. And they it was just a checklist that I went through as a staff person. I looked at the building plans and said, yep, they have those things, or nope, they don't have enough of those things. And then covered entryways was another requirement. They had to have at least 4 of these, and they had to have covered entryway for the main entrance of the building. They had to have the main entrance of the building facing the street. So there's some non-discretionary design requirements that we can put in there. Whether or not that meets your community or not, I can bring those back as well at the next meeting. I can integrate some of those into here. Since I worked in that community, it's been a couple of years since I've done that, but I have access to those and I can bring those back.
Well, I'm not, yeah, what I want to try to avoid though is. is that the guy after me or the guy two after me, from now. Gets a heavy hand and decides that he is now the king of all things building. And starts doing an HOA type of a situation on you, and you don't really want that to happen, but you want some guidelines. So that your houses are aesthetically pleasing, that they fit the neighborhood, that. The aesthetic qualities, enhance the city. And I don't know how you do that without doing what you're describing, having some non-discretionary guidelines. Or presenting it to an architectural review board, and having been before at least 25 or 30 architectural review boards in my career, I hate them. Because you get a guy in there that says, I like blue shutters. Or I want each one of those windows to have 16 divide lights in it. For what reason, I don't know. But they wield the power of approval on you, and you don't want that to be the case, not in a public body like this. But there has to be some guideline. And it's better if it's non-discretionary, if we're well thought out, so that we can put them on paper. So going in, what you have to ascribe to when you're gonna be building your house. Your architect can take care of those issues during the design process. You're not costing him any more money. He just knows he has to incorporate these values into the house. As opposed to coming before somebody like me who has a bad day and decides he just doesn't like what you got, and that's not reasonable either.
So those were non-discretionary. The main complaint that I heard about that type of regulation is that in a community that is supposed to be promoting affordable housing, because that's the state requirement, it adds a lot of cost to the house to add those design elements in. The simplest thing to build is a square box with a roof, right? But that's also one of the least appealing. Unless you have, one of those intervening with other things that aren't square boxes. I've been through your residential portion of your downtown, and trying to define that is. That's going to be difficult, because it's eclectic, but it works, right? It's people that build houses that they were proud to live in, and they don't look the same. They don't have the same design elements to them. There's no contiguous design. It's obvious that you didn't have design requirements for those, through the centuries that you've established them. But it works okay. So, the problem, what is the problem you're trying to solve with design requirements for single family residences?
I don't want four walls and a roof.
But we have that here in Toledo, and it looks great.
Where?
I mean, just right down the block from Eric's house, there's four walls and a roof. It's about as square and as unappealing as you could possibly see, but it's right between two other houses that have front porches, and there are a number of those in your downtown area that.
I'm willing to defer the.
Well, they have a 2-story one. I don't remember where that was. I think it's over by the grocery store, something that went in it's fairly plain looking. If you look at it, it doesn't have a lot of design features, but it does have kind of an extended roof over the garage, which is also not a preferred design element in some communities. They want you to push the garage back so it's not street. It doesn't make it a automobile predominant house front. Not looking at a garage series of garage doors. So I can bring back the standards that I worked with, and you can look at those. Those are not consistent with what you have downtown, but they are consistent with a number of other communities that have adopted design standards in a number of different states. I mean, that's how they adopted theirs, is they went around and looked at what everybody else has done and figured out, oh, what are some of the things that we can regulate and make it non-discretionary? And that's why they did what they did. It adds cost to a building. And unless there's a real concern that you're trying to address, I mean, if all you don't want is the 4 square walls with a roof, then it's easier just to say that than to require a bunch of other things.
Oh.
If you want to say you want to have design features that have, different horizontal or vertical planes to the building elevation, that's a simple requirement. It's an administrative check, and it will probably add cost to a building because you'll have angles in buildings, but
I keep thinking about you saying that it had costs, and I think of those costs, and I think about the cost of making, what is it, R36 in your walls now?
Oh, well, yeah, there's a lot of complaints about that too.
They're one affordable housing right there.
Yeah,
So some of our newer development, some of our newer houses, the one on Silver is about the most simple house you're ever gonna see.
is that the one that we looked at when we drove around that one day?
No, and then when I was asking you, what's wrong with these two houses, why don't they look like they fit, it's because they were garage front and forward. And we
Okay.
have very few of those in Toledo.
Yeah, well, that's true of a lot of older communities because they didn't do that. They hid the garages behind
They
and,
didn't have
Or not
cars.
at all.
Or not at all.
or not at all, yeah.
Well, my bigger concern, I mean, I like what you're saying there about some non-discretionary stuff. And we can't address it here anyway. I mean, this isn't the time or place. It's what people do with their houses after they're there.
Mm.
And I don't know how you regulate that, but that's not for the planning commission to,
Well,
but that's
there's-
my bigger concern.
There's a whole nother section of code after we get done with the whole growth management thing in zoning code, then there is a nuisance abatement and all that stuff where you deal with what you deal with people after.
Yeah.
Not usually a planning piece, but
No.
I am
Right.
working on one of those right now with the Kalama Planning Commission. We're working through defining what is a nuisance.
Okay.
What shouldn't your neighbor do?
I think the city council Monday was passing resolutions with regards to code enforcement.
Oh, well, code enforcement's another area of nuisance
I
abatement.
think they were making them not criminal but civil.
Oh, okay. I should pay more attention to what your council does too, that help to inform me what I'm doing elsewhere. So I will bring back some design guidelines for discussion. And with that, I mean, that would be significant enough where I don't think we'd be heading for a November hearing.
That's significant enough.
It is, I mean, if we're gonna get into design guidelines at any significant level, that's a month's discussion in itself, I'm sure.
I don't want to do that, Todd, and I don't know how you feel about that. I'm not trying to make anybody's life miserable.
Well, it doesn't make, I mean, I
No,
love
not
what I
yours.
do.
I'm talking about the citizens' lives miserable, but. You know, you just hope everybody has common sense when they're building that they.
So how about if I on the fly try to put some fairly simple things in that prevent square boxes? I'll
No.
require multiple planes along street frontages of elevations and side yards that face streets, so you'll have to have a varying facade of a building.
But don't you ultimately, you're still gonna need a board to decide the exceptions, no matter what you put down there. There's gonna be a point at where somebody has to look at the plans and make a meeting and make a decision if what they wanna build is okay or not.
Well, somebody has to review the plans for, the simple answer, yeah, I mean, there will still be a building permit review.
Right.
And you'll have a building plans examiner that will make sure it meets state building codes. But a square box with a simple, even a flat roof.
Right.
State.
Well, let's say
building codes.
somebody comes in, an architect that wants to build a really great square box, and it's just beautiful, and it's just gonna be fit perfectly in. That person's gonna wanna, hey, look at my square box, and let's talk about it, cause it really does fit in. Where's that process gonna go? In this situation, if we have that rule in there.
So something like that would have to be a variance, which would get elevated to the commission to
Council?
consider.
Right.
Yeah, so as long as you have always a way to consider the exceptions, then you can easily codify the things that you for sure know nobody wants.
But a lot of
And then-
times, those processes become costly. You know, an applicant that has to go through a variance is probably looking to spend 5 to 10 grand to get through that process in a jurisdiction. I mean, that's usually have those decided, I mean,
That's not tenable in this town.
So
so,
wouldn't that encourage people to stay within the guidelines you did want? In other words, if that process is onerous, they'll be like, okay, we'll just build it how they wanted in the first place. I'm trying to help you.
I know you are. Why'd I bring this up?
Property rights.
That's really,
Tricky.
well, I don't know, maybe after planning commission, we can go for a walk and I can see if I can find that square box. It really doesn't look so bad. I mean, it's got landscaping around it and it's like, yeah, that's a plain Jane simple design. I mean, somebody was cheap when they built that, but.
The new one down by the park is the one that's the eyesore.
Right.
There's a new big box down by the park
These people.
At the end of February.
It would be nice that that would never happen again.
Well, I guess we can do that if you'd like. I'd be happy to work with you on that. And if you'd like, I'll bring back some simple requirements that are non-discretionary that I think that'll work. Leave the variance option open if somebody absolutely can't do that for some reason. Maybe we make it just go to council so that maybe council approves variances to those, although council will probably hate that because they'll get inundated with them. If you make it too easy, then people will just ask.
Aren't that many people here yet at that time? I don't think we're.
Well, this is a zoning code for at least the next 10 years. You can go back and modify it as you want. You can change your zoning code whenever you want. You're not restricted by that. So if we do something that doesn't work, we can fix it in a couple months.
I don't know.
Well, I think for the most part, I mean, our future growth is gonna be subdivisions and individual houses on property where the people are building a good sized house. And those problems take care of themselves. Because through the review process, the subdivision is going to do what they need to do. You know, the planning commission and council require them for conditions of approval. And the guy building his 2,500 square foot house out on his new 5 acre lot he just bought is looking to build a house for himself anyway, so he wants it to look nice. What I'm trying to avoid is the guy that comes into town, picks off 3 lots, builds on the cheap, the cheapest thing you can get, which is an eyesore to the city, rents them out and leaves town.
And your non-discretionary language takes care of that, right?
Well, we can regulate that so it doesn't happen. So you only get built what you want, but it does, everything that we regulate adds burden to somebody, right? I mean, it's somebody's burden to comply with that regulation. Now, instead of building just a straight framed wall right up and down these sides, now I've got to do extra foundation. I've got to have different building designs. Some of the CAN plans don't work anymore because they don't meet this requirement. So it adds cost but it achieves the goal of what you want as a community, as long as it's a problem that's why I was asking you, what problem are we trying to regulate around? And the simple answer I got was the square box, and I think I can write some pretty simple language to regulate against that.
I'd like to see that.
But there's also a very long list of items that you can add that add even more cost to a building, but add even more character to a building.
Well, we don't need to get carried away, but it is probably a good idea to avoid the sort of
Square
thing
box.
Steve was talking about.
Yeah, just
I mean, as long as somebody's building a new house, if we've already got square boxes around town. We don't have to make them change that. But if you're building a new house, you might as well add a little design feature here and there that's not gonna break the bank. Maybe.
so we can make those apply to new home construction only and not remodels. We can do that in the zoning code. If you put them in your zoning code, they would apply to the zone, right? So everybody that does a remodel would have to either show how they were more complying or come into compliance.
Okay, so we'd have to specify new construction.
New construction.
Okay, all right,
But that's good input. See, it's good discussion. I'll make sure I add that in there.
See what it started, Steve.
It's not that difficult. I mean, I know it's not fun to go through all the zoning code and all the language and all those pieces, but what you're asking for isn't really that challenging. I'll bring back some examples for next month, and I'll put something in the code that I think is a minimalist approach, and then I'll bring back an example of something I think is maybe at the other end of the spectrum. And you can look at both of those and pick and choose what you want in there, and then finish it up.
All right.
And I'll make a note to go back and check the map on some of the other residential zones. The mixed use zone, the design guidelines, I heard that you all wanted me to add some more specificity, but leave some of the vagueness in there because those will likely be reviewed by planning commission or some review committee. Was there anything in the industrial? We had already talked about the mixed use waterfront before, but if there's anything that jumps out at you in there, it's never too late to talk about it.
No.
Industrial, heavy or light?
Both of those are new. We haven't talked very much about
Right.
commercial or the industrial zone. Or the light industrial zones. So,
Didn't we define that, the commercial zone?
commercial zone is above industrial zone. It's a one-page deal.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I thought we talked about that.
We did, we talked about it being limited to a certain amount of square feet, so that anything over that, we would have a conditional use. permit
Right.
And have the opportunity to review.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's written now.
I think it's 15,000 square feet in this one, but,
And I think I think 15,000 was the size of the building over here.
Hmm.
The one that's back down this block,
The new one?
over here behind Donna's or something, there's a 15,000 square foot.
Yeah.
I think your grocery store is much bigger than that, as I recall.
okay. So who comes up with the trail stuff along the waterfront?
Well, so that's a piece of shorelines. The public access elements are part of your shorelines code.
Right, and we wanted, and I believe we discussed that we wanted a trail to go along the river. Rather than requiring them to provide 12 feet of access going from the street to the river. So I guess who actually ends up designing the trail? And who puts that into code that that's a requirement?
Well, but I mean, we could put it in here to emphasize it. It leaves it ambiguous, I think, in your shorelines code as it's written, because you've adopted. I think you adopted the county shorelines regulations.
I didn't know that we had adopted any regulations as of yet. I know we discussed it.
You have shorelines regulations
Long time ago.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
Does that include, does the Shorelines Act, if you want to call it that, does that include trails along the river?
It includes a requirement for public access,
Just public access?
public access.
Because someone who owns a property along the river here, they may very well not want a trail along the edge of their property by the river.
Well, I can almost guarantee you that most of the property owners that have to develop trails along the river don't want them there. They don't want the public walking through their backyards. in a lot
No,
of
of
cases.
course not.
They buy that riverfront
No.
property,
Yeah.
but the state shorelines regulations require public access, and then a lot of communities build on that by requiring the paved walkway that connects through the entire system, so that you're required to put something in your
But
backyard.
ultimately, I think we foresee a waterfront district there that's full of bistros and shops and things, so the trail is actually a good thing. It takes them between
Yeah.
shops and restaurants without having to walk on the street. Until such time, the guy is not required to do anything. He's not required to build a trail behind it unless he wants to
Develop.
change.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
Okay, we're not
We need
twisting.
to codify that so that that is understood that if you are going to turn a parcel into a commercial enterprise, that's gonna be one of the requirements. And the discussion we had was, do we require them to dedicate 12-foot wide section of their property, which would be even worse, going from the street to the river, or just have them build a 5-foot trail down by the river. And they're only responsible for the section at their property, so.
And the trail is a hard surface trail, right?
Right.
It's something that's like a sidewalk, a 5 foot,
Okay.
5 or 6 foot is typically the width of a sidewalk in a
Okay,
community. So I will add that into there too, to make sure it's required. I'll go double check your shoreline. I'm sure your shorelines code does not require that specifically. But I can add that requirement for the houses along that
But is that restricted, sorry to interrupt, is that restricted to the commercial developments in that area, or is that residential housing also?
It would be for both if you're in that zone.
If you build new, you're going to be required to put that in.
The waterfront mixed use zone, we talked a lot about
Right.
that and we talked about the public access element, but I didn't put the required paved trail in there. so-
But not for existing homes, not for existing houses.
Right,
Right.
only when you redevelop, you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what, I think, that's what concerned me more than anything, is the thought of going to a property owner and say, hey, you gotta build a trail there, because you're by the river.
But if your neighbors up closer to the street all develop and they put the trail in, it dead ends your property. You know, you're gonna have public access to your property,
You can probably put a tree stump in there and say, in the sidewalk. huh?
in the sidewalk.
Nobody would do that.
Yeah, you guys like to do that stuff like that, you know.
So I'll make sure I add that one in too.
You guys like in Toledo, everybody had guns, you pass my property, I kill you there, this is what everybody answers is that, you know.
But we're not in a hurry to get this to public hearing. Like I said, I don't plan on taking it to council until January, so. So maybe kind of given the input and the changes that we talked about, maybe I'll bring back a more complete draft of this and a first draft of policy. for
Well, I will
next
be
year.
here in December, so
You won't be here in December
not late December. Being campus.
for the planning commission meeting is,
Is that, so are you missing the, so the third Wednesday?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
so we may not have a planning commission meeting in December. But, well, that's
I'm sure
okay.
you can hold one, you can go, so I won't be here for it, it'll be the 18th.
Yeah.
The planning commission meeting is the 18th. That is getting closer to the holiday.
And I might actually be here. I don't think I leave until the 18th or the 20th.
And then November.
November would be perfect, because it's the week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I think we're okay for holiday meetings as long as everybody can make those. So I won't plan on trying to do a public hearing in November. Maybe we can do that in December's a terrible time to do a public hearing. Maybe we can do it in December or January and then I'll follow up with council. And that'll be our target to get the zoning code written.
For all of you out in the audience, our anticipation is try to get it done for the growth management plan, which isn't due until later that year, so.
June 25.
June of 25 is when the funding runs out. December of 25 is when they're all due back to the state.
You'll have at least one public hearing as part of budget. So in case you wanted to piggyback.
That'll be in December.
In January, but it might be the first week of December.
Yeah.
I mean, not January, I'm sorry,
November.
November, but worst case is the first week of
Oh,
December.
you pass your budgets in November.
We try to be done by the first week in December.
Okay. You know, it gets tough around the holidays anyway for everybody to. And public hearings around that time aren't the best, especially when it's on something that has broad.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be on a scheduled planning commission meeting either.
We could do a special hearing, that's true. But yeah, it'll go, and then there'll be other hearings on the comp plan, you know, through June of next year. There'll be more time to coordinate that. Maybe I was trying to be too optimistic about rushing that through. But it felt like we were closer, but maybe it doesn't feel that way now, so maybe I'll take another crack at that code with the input that I've received tonight. I think we're done with the zoning map.
I think so.
I don't think we need to have another workshop to discuss that. So the next piece would be, you know, starting to talk a little bit about comp plan policies. That address, you know, long-term community goals for economic development. I don't plan on. I'm only gonna modify your comp plan in the way that it needs to be modified to reflect the zones. You guys just did your comp plan back in 21, so it's not that old. So I believe that probably still reflects the community sentiment. So I don't plan on going back and, unlike your zoning code, which needed a lot.
Yeah.
I think your comp plan is probably pretty close. I just need to add in some recognition of our new zones. And then there's a couple of state law changes that we'll also have to recognize for procedures and other things, but I don't think there's a lot in your comp plan. I'm hoping there isn't. But we'll revisit that in chunks too. I'll bring that back in a couple of different chunks and we can talk about it.
Okay, do you need a workshop for that?
It's up to you. I know these meetings, especially when we're talking about code and text and, I mean, it's kind of fun to talk about maps because you can identify, but I don't know how you all are. After 2 hours now of talking about this stuff. Do we want to try another workshop next month to get through zoning code and I can bring back some comp plan policies?
I'm okay with it.
I'm
You are?
fine,
Okay.
I'm fine, yeah.
And he's not here to vote, so he doesn't get a vote.
So we'll do the 5 o'clock workshop next month and the other. And I'll probably workshop the policies and bring the zoning code back again.
Okay,
And then we can decide if we want to set a hearing after that.
so should we move forward with unfinished business discussion and recommendation to council on public notice sign?
So I can take that, to explain why it's on the agenda.
Okay.
So the huge sign that Kurt Reddick had to put together for the public notice was based on the 2-inch letters that are in the land development code document. And it's been discussed at meetings, and Todd had commented that, you know, any changes to the land development codes does trigger SEPA. But I believe that there was a counter argument that that particular paragraph is really an administrative thing, which doesn't really fall under SEPA. So so it would be nice to lower the impact on public notice signs, because right now it's 8 by 10, 8 feet by 10 feet, and they're prohibitively expensive to pull together, so. What
So what are we trying to do, like decrease the size of the letters by a half or?
Either decrease the size of the letters, or Todd had actually mentioned on previous occasions that there are some standard sizes of public notice signs, that we could go that direction as well. So one, I want to make sure that Rachel and I heard correctly, that this was an administrative change to that document, and that planning commission give a recommendation so we can generate a resolution for council to approve.
So the good thing is that we do have other changes to our procedural codes that we're required to make as part of our comp plan update.
Mhm.
And we'll be bringing those back after we're done with zoning, then we'll go into, after we're done with zoning and the comp plan policies, then we'll go into procedures. And with those tweaks, that'll all this stuff will go through a SEPA review eventually together.
Mhm.
And that could be a change that we include in that.
So,
I don't remember coming to the conclusion that was, it's in your zoning code. It's in,
it's in the land development code document.
yeah, and the land development code is what has been adopted by ordinance, so it's changes to that document require SEPA, and I'm not sure maybe if I answered a question incorrectly or if I
Okay.
misunderstood. So it would require a non-project action to change that document, but maybe Rachel has also been reaching out to others too, so she might have gotten some better guidance on that. I'm going off of what I believe to be true
Mhm.
historically,
Mhm.
which, you know, I'm not an attorney, so she might have asked the city attorney, do we need to go through
I think we're
SEPA for
just
this?
trying
And he
to
might have said no, or
Prevent developers from being stung between now and the time that all of this is adopted.
yeah,
Well,
Um,
well, you could ignore the ordinance, you could ignore the rule. I mean,
I'm just gonna say that 4x8 for a standard subdivision development is not outrageous. It's, I've seen them as small as 4x6, but I've seen them by 4x8.
mhm.
And
Well,
when
the
you're
2-inch
putting,
letter
you're putting
sign.
100 and something homes out there, it's a very small sign.
it depends on the scale of where you are, right? For
Mhm.
You know.
that, a 4x8 sign, it's a sheet of plywood as you're driving by it at at 35 miles an hour, right?
Right.
Down here downtown, a 4x8 sheet of plywood on the city block kind of looks ridiculously huge,
Has a shadow.
you know, so. But for noticing, typically I've seen, you know, either, that they usually use like a 4x8 sign for the larger developments, the public notices. For other things, I've seen, you know, 18 by 24, which is 18 is a foot and a half by 2 feet, and that's for more things that are pedestrian scale. And then I've also seen, you know, the 24 by 36 signs, which are popular printer format for large scale printers and plotters, 36 by 48 and 24 by 36. So that way, if a jurisdiction has in-house large format printing capabilities, they can print those in their office. And a lot of print shops have those, so you don't have to go to a specialty sign shop too. But the need to inform the public is what you're trying to do. There's always the noticing, the mailing requirements for anything that gets public notice has to get mailed out to the neighbors.
Right.
So you're really trying to notify a broader audience that there's something going on. And in these days, some of the communities have even removed the site posting requirements in favor of a web posting requirement. So if there's city webpage that's frequented or viewed, then they're oftentimes posted there instead of being posted on the site now. Because people are more likely to see it online than they are in person.
So what do you want from us?
Well, apparently nothing.
Okay,
We
So-
could,
We can do that.
Rachel's not here. I don't know if she got better information.
I'll go back to her and.
Maybe that's where that came from. I don't remember giving that opinion, but
Okay.
I could have been wrong about my opinion too. So Rachel's, I know she's been working with MRSC on other things, so they might have said, no, that's a policy thing. You don't need to see.
Okay,
I wouldn't tell you that you had to, if somebody else told you you
okay,
didn't. but-
I'll work with her on that.
okay, permit moratorium, I think we can table that again for another month.
Let me just take it off until it becomes an issue. It just seems
We can
kind
do
of,
that too.
it just seems kind of silly that you guys have the same answer every month.
And other business planning commission classes, are we?
I don't have any information on that. My hunch is that maybe some of you haven't taken your required classes.
Well, required versus what she's throwing out there are two different things, you know.
I think she's most concerned about the required stuff, so the
Open
Meetings
meeting
Act
stuff,
and
I
the
mean-
public records requests.
Yeah, that was done a long time ago.
Well, I said some, I don't know if there might be some, I don't know. But my hunch is that the only reason she brought that was that,
Well, folks, have you
Some-
taken your open meetings classes?
I was in the same house when my wife took hers.
Huh?
I was in the same house when my wife took hers.
You were in the same,
Same house, so
so, all right, so that, I think that's.
I think that's the answer.
I think that- so I should take it.
If you haven't taken both of those seminars, you should. And then at the end of the training, there is a PDF that you can print or send via email. That it's an affidavit that said that you've taken it. So,
Okay. I could probably find time in my busy schedule for that.
But you too, Lucas.
Business schedule. I trade my life for your life. No,
At
so
least
yeah,
your boss,
yeah, I'm going
at
to
least
do
your
that.
boss is lenient.
Yeah,
I've heard that,
yeah, I can.
I'm surprised she let you get away with that.
yeah.
Okay, and finally, public input limited to 3 minutes each. Anyone want to speak? Well, I thank you all for coming tonight. Got to get through it. Hopefully we'll end up with a far better city. I get a motion to adjourn,
You have it.
second,
Okay.
all in favor?
All right.
Right.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Right.